Well, Diane, I just want to say thank you for sharing that difficult moment, that difficult time from your tour out there, your deployment out there, and another life-changing aspect, right?
Mhm.
Um, so how was it for you meeting the family and connecting with them? And obviously, you had to then help them, you know, put Bobby to rest. So can you share any more with that? You don't have to if it's too hard, but it's a big moment in your life.
Mhm. I had talked with his family, like his some of his sisters and his mom before then because we were getting ready to go meet them and we were making plans and I had more access to telephones than he did.
Okay.
Um when the incident happened, his family had not been notified. And so they told me the family wasn't notified and I had to be put in my room for 12 hours. 12
Wow.
hours until they notified the family. So this was going into February 14th. So that kind of changed my whole, I guess, view on Valentine's Day. It's not a really celebratory day for me anymore. But so I
Sure.
was locked in my room. They had Logan with me. They had Sergeant Tejeda with me, and I think my roommate was like in and out. But they put me on buddy watch so that I didn't harm myself or anything. And that is protocol. Um, and while I was in there, I was trying to sleep, which I couldn't. But I was trying to sleep and just make myself wake up from this nightmare because I was thinking that's what it was, and unfortunately, it was reality. And then I couldn't sleep, so I was holding on to this little stuffed, like, stuffed hand thing that's, like, for his team, like, his football team, his college team. So I was holding on to that, and I was reading our letters and just crying. It was miserable. Logan packed a bag for me, so I didn't have to worry about, like, changing or anything like that on the way. When they finally told me that his family was notified, I grabbed my cell phone, the little Afghani push phone, and I called my older brother because he served as well, and he had already been in Iraq, and so he was back from Iraq, I believe, and I called him and I told him what happened, and he was just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sis. I'm so sorry," but he didn't really know what to say, and so he told me to call my mom, and my mom and I weren't really talking at that point, but I was so desperate for like love and just to feel comfort that I called her, and she was comforting as best as she could be with a situation like that. She asked me a couple questions and she just told me like, um, keep your head up and everything's gonna be okay. And she told me she would be there for the funeral, which I wasn't expecting, but she was there and I was appreciative of that. Because she didn't like Bobby for whatever reason. Um, and so after that I went into the office and I looked at the report because it was still on the share drive, so I kind of got a little bit of the information of what happened, and I called his mom, and she was, of course, crying and upset, and like their brothers and sisters were there, and so they were crying and upset, and I got to talk to his older brother, and I just kind of let her know, like, hey, I'm still coming to Texas, and I'm gonna come bury him, and so I
Hmm.
let her know, like, I'm flying home, and on the way again, you're not supposed to cry in the military. You're not supposed to show any kind of emotion. The only emotion that you could show was anger. But I was struggling in that moment, and at that point, I just didn't care. So I was crying a lot silently. So tears were just coming out, and I would just try to hurry up and wipe them. But I didn't care who
Yeah.
saw me, and people kind of just left me alone at that point. So I went to Bagram. They flew me out to Kuwait, and then from there, they flew me to Austin, which is where his family is from.
Hmm.
When I got to Austin, I was met by his sisters at the airport. They took me back to the house where the casualty officer was with his mom. And so it was really heavy getting to
Yeah.
know them and meet them in that moment. Um, Kind of just went through the process and I tried to keep myself together and I tried to be strong for them. Um, for the sake of Bobby because I know like he was kind of like their stronghold and like the glue to their family. And so like I kind of was like, okay, I'm gonna be strong for them and try not to cry. And so I would cry at night when everyone was asleep, or I would go into the bathroom and cry, get myself together, and come back out. But when his body arrived,
That was
I
difficult.
had yeah, I had
Yeah.
the biggest breakdown, like, just as bad as I did in Afghanistan, and it wasn't even that, like, I saw him because he was still in the casket with the flag over it, um, but when it came off the plane, I had a huge meltdown, like, my knees buckled, and, like, I kind of, like, was about to fall, and his mom was standing right next to me and kind of caught me, um, and everything that I was just holding in, I just cried and cried. Her shirt was so soaked in tears. Like, I cried to the point where I couldn't even cry. Like, I had no more tears left, and I was just like, like heaving, you know? Like, I don't know how
Yeah.
else to
Yeah.
explain that.
Yeah.
uh, but it was so bad, and she was just like trying to wipe my tears and like getting my hair out of my face, and I was just trying to cover my face because I was so embarrassed. Like, we're not supposed to cry, but I was so hurt and just distraught seeing his casket come out of that plane. It was the worst feeling ever, knowing like that's my fiance in that casket, and we were supposed to go on this beautiful trip to the Texas coast. We were supposed to get married. We were talking about having kids, and my future in that moment felt over. Like, it
Hmm.
just felt done, and, like, every dream that I had with them was just over, and it's
Hmm.
like, how do you let go and how do you say goodbye to that? Like, it was so abrupt and so unexpected. I was in shock, like,
Yeah.
literally in shock, and so, my mom, when we did the funeral, my mom had taken pictures, and when I look back at those pictures, I'm like, I was so out of it. I was
Hmm.
mentally, like, just gone. Physically, I was there, of course, but mentally just so out of it. Um, and when his body came, they kind of explained that day too, what had happened, and basically Bobby was out on patrol with his unit, and they were returning to the fob. Their mission was already over, they were coming back, and I guess there was this mother and kids, and Bobby stopped to give them candy, and that's just like him. He was always someone who's very kind and liked to make people smile. um well, while he was giving candy, there was an Afghani on a motorbike who was a suicide bomber and detonated himself as he drove by, and he killed Bobby and two others and injured a few more people, um and those kids, of course. And so, Bobby got the brunt of that, explosion, and so they recommended a closed casket funeral.
Okay. Yep.
And for me, there was just no way that I could bury him without seeing him. But unfortunately, we weren't married, and so I wasn't even allowed to see his body. The only people who were allowed to see his body were his mom and his older brother, who was the one who, um accompanied his body from Dover. I'm trying to remember if his father got to see him. I'm not sure, but I know those two for sure. And so his mom went back, and I'm freaking out. Like, how can I actually know for sure that this is Bobby if I don't see him? Like, how can you go from not seeing him, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden he's gone. Like, how do I know this?
Yeah.
And so she's back there and she's viewing his body, and she comes out and she's in tears, but she's also the strong one in her family, so she's trying not to cry. And she just said, um he looks good, and they're gonna fix him up so that we can have an open casket funeral. And I was so thankful for that, so thankful. But at the same time, that's kind of what traumatizes me the most, was actually seeing his body. So we had the viewing, a couple days later, and my mom had come, and everybody was going up to the casket and, giving their condolences and all that, and I finally had my moment where I went, because we were kinda off to the side, in, like, a family area, and everybody else was, like, kind of in the center. So we got up, and I went up to the casket, and, sorry, it's just,
It's okay.
this gets me every time. I went up to him, and he did look good. Like, they had told me, he was missing parts of his arm and his stomach and just parts of, like, his left side, and they did a really good job of, like, filling in those areas. I don't know how they did that, but they did, and, the uniform covers majority of it, and he had on white gloves and whatnot, and, I just remember looking at his skull and his neckline, and his beret just didn't fit the same
Mhm.
because, like, part of his skull was, like, sunken in
Okay.
because it was missing, and, like, he had, like, paper mache or something around his neck, and I don't know if that was to cover wounds or to, like, hold that area together, and so seeing him in that state haunted me for years,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
those images have, like, been engraved into my mind, and just seeing how different he was and how cold he was, like, the warmth of his body was gone, and he had a ton of makeup, and I'm sure that was to cover, like, bruising and whatnot, and he was completely swollen, and, I'm so scared of dead bodies, but, like, I didn't care in that moment. I was just holding him and hugging him and kissing him and just crying, and I know I took a long time at the casket, but I was thankful that everybody in there kinda just let me have my moment, and I just looked at everything that I could to remember because I knew that this was the last time I was gonna physically see him
Yeah.
ever, and that was extremely hard for me to take in, like, this person who I loved so much, who I thought was my soulmate, was just gone, and all I had was his, like, lifeless body to stare at, and it was so different from the last time I seen him because of all the damages, and so that was extremely difficult for me to
Mhm.
process, and I think I was still just in shock. I felt insane almost because I was questioning my reality. I was like, "Is this really happening? Am I really standing here, like, about to bury him, and, like, is this, like, just a dream? Like, am I really, like, is this really going on?" And so I was battling myself mentally, and I felt, like, insane because I was just like, "Diana, you're physically here. You physically see everything that's going on. Like, this has to be real. It is real." But I was questioning myself, and, like, I've never really had to deal with that before, and so I know I worked with casualties and had to do that and see those things, but, like, this one hit home because it was someone who I loved so much. It was so
Sure.
personal. Sorry, I had to
Yeah.
grab a tissue
That's
'cause I'm
fine.
dying
That's
here.
fine. It's fine.
I'm falling apart. I'm trying to hold it together. Believe it or not, I've come a long way because before when I used to talk about that, I would just be like a huge mess, but a lot of therapy.
No, you're doing good. You're doing good.
Thank you. Um, yeah, so I questioned myself and I was questioning my reality and I was just like I thought I was losing it. I was just like, "Diana, you need to get this together." So we go through the funeral and they do, 21 gun salute, and I cannot tell you anything that happened at that funeral. I know that they did the 21 gun salute because I remember hearing it. I remember hearing like the bagpipes when they played, and I remember watching him being lowered. But anything else that was said, I know sometime they were given a flag. Like, I was just there physically, but mentally, I was so out of it. I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
And same thing with, like, the after the viewing and all that stuff, I at the church, I just remember the song being played at the end, but I don't remember anything going on or anything that was said in between that time, and, I remember at the end of the funeral, they were lowering his casket and people started to disperse, and, like, I had rode in limo with his family going there, but they had already like, I wasn't worried about leaving, I wanted to be there as long as I could, and my mom, kinda stood off in the side, and I think that's when she was, like, taking her pictures or whatnot, but she let me have my moment, and I was just stuck there. I stood up, and I was just frozen watching my fiance's casket being lowered, and there was only a few other people who stood around, but most people had left, and I just felt glued. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything but just stare and watch, like, my future just be demolished, like, in front of me, and, really try to process that reality that, like, it was really done, and it was really over, and it wasn't by choice for either of us, but,
Yeah.
like, he was taken. Uh And my mom just kinda walked over after, I wanna say, like, 5 or 10 minutes, and she was just like, "Come on, Mija, we have to go." And I didn't wanna go, I just wanted to be there. But, like, in my head, I just said, like, my final goodbye, even though I wasn't, like, ready.
Yeah.
Uh, and then, like, I just let her walk me away because I just didn't feel like I had the strength to do it. So she kinda just put her arm around me and walked me to the car. And me and my mom aren't really close, and so, or at least back then. And so the one person who I wanted to just hug and cry and just tell me, like, everything was gonna be okay, I didn't feel like I could. I didn't feel comfortable doing that because growing up, my mom always told me that crying was weak, and, she never wanted me to be viewed as weak, and so she drilled that into my head, and so I tried my best to hold it together in front of her, but in that moment, it's, like, extremely difficult, so I kinda stuffed. I started learning to just shove it down and don't express it and just hold it in, and so, uh, that was the start of another bad habit, stuffing, but it worked for the military aspect of it because that's what they wanted us to do. They wanted us to keep going and drive on. Um, and after that, I was given the option to either go back to Afghanistan or return to Colorado. But I felt like there was nothing for me in Colorado. Like my support system and who I needed to help me get through was in Afghanistan. Like Logan was in Afghanistan. And I didn't think I would be able to function correctly and by myself in Colorado. So I went back to Afghanistan and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna finish it out. I have my support system, and I know Bobby would want me to, and I wanna make him proud." And so I went back out and I finished that deployment, but that was extremely hard too because 1, I'm different now, everything is changed, and 2, people now knew that he was killed and he was on our wall of, heroes for the memorial, and all that,
Yeah.
and, people avoided me like the plague. I think people just didn't know what to say, or how to say it, and so instead of wanting or saying the wrong thing, um, they just avoided me completely, and so I felt so isolated and so alone. It was terrible. There was 2 people who I can remember, like, really talking to me, and that was Logan and a friend of mine, his name was Rob Wenzel, who unfortunately has passed away, but he used to help me in the gym, and so he would let me express myself, and he would talk to me and be like, "Okay, let's get this workout in. We're gonna let it out in a healthy way," and I am so thankful
Mm.
for him in those moments. And then, of course, Logan, she was the only one who was really close to me and would talk to me, and she told me, like, later on, people used to say, "You're so strong, and they don't know how you did it or how you went back to Afghanistan." And I'm like, "Really? Because nobody told me any of those things. I was alone."
Mm.
And me and her worked 2 different shifts, so I had her, but I only had her for a limited. amount of time.
Yeah.
And so what I learned to do was throw myself into my work. It kept me busy. My
Yeah.
work, my workout, sleep. That's it. I
Yeah.
was like a robot, just kept doing it over and over again. And that was my coping method. Aside from that, I was extremely angry. All
Yeah.
bearing went
But
out the window. And my leadership was very, very gracious with me, to say the least. Yeah, I got in trouble here and there. I got smoked. I got canceled a lot. I got talked to a lot, but I never got demoted. I never got like an Article 15 or anything like that, which I probably should have because I was cussing out NCOs left and right. I was ready to fight people. I'd never fought people, but I was pretty close.
you were ready for it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I was angry because that was the only acceptable emotion that you could show out
Sure.
there.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I went through it. We redeployed. I was pushing people out, or we didn't redeploy yet. We were pushing people out to redeploy, and we go to Bagram. And so they sent me and Logan together, and I was thankful too that that's another thing that they were consistent with. They kept me and Logan together a lot, and I think they knew that I needed her. I think she knew I needed her too. So we get to Bagram, and then we're under a different leadership. And this guy was an asshole. Like, with lack of better words, Messar Robledo was the biggest asshole I've ever come across in the military. He made me do a ramp ceremony. A ramp
Okay.
ceremony is when fallen soldiers are taken onto the plane and we sit there or we stand there and we salute. Who the hell does that? Who
Yeah.
does that? He just didn't care. And that's why I say he was the biggest asshole that I know. He didn't care. He wasn't taking no for an answer. I tried to like plead with him and be like, "Son, Robledo, I'm not ready for this." And he didn't care. I was a private. He was a master sergeant. You were gonna do it, and that's that. The cool part about that day was I was distraught. I was not ready to take part in this ramp ceremony. I didn't want to see caskets going. Like I had just experienced this shit personally, right?
Yeah.
But we go out there, we go to the flight line, and Logan and I are walking towards the tarmac and like the area where the actual plane was gonna be, the tail of the plane, and we ran into our drill sergeant. Who runs into their drill sergeant in Afghanistan? It was like such a small world. It was so cool. And I was like, "Hey, Drill Sergeant Chadwick," or whatever. Like he lifted my spirits, and he was like, "What's wrong?" or whatever. I kind of told him the gist, like a quick synopsis, like what was going on and why it was so hard for me. And he was like, "Hey, just keep your chin up, all right? You guys are gonna be okay." And he patted Logan and was like, "Look after her." And he ran back to his platoon. So we go over there, we get the ramp somewhere ceremony completed. I didn't care. I was crying through it. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? It was such an emotional event, and it hit so hard because, like, literally, I just lost my fiance, literally, like a month ago,
Yeah.
and so we got it done, and we're coming back to the truck, and I'm trying to open the door, but this freaking a-hole locked the dang doors, and he's waiting for the actual like end of the plane to go up and for it to take off because he has to make sure all that went through. But I'm like, dude, the least you could do is freaking unlock the door. I'm distraught here. So clearly he didn't care. So I kind of just put my head down, and we had like a PC at the time. So it's like the cap almost looks like a baseball cap headgear. And
Okay.
I just put it down, and I'm starting to cry. And just it's hitting me hard. And so my drill sergeant came running over, and he was like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And like starts cussing out my master sergeant. He's a sergeant first class, but he's cussing out the master sergeant. And one of my sergeant's just looking dumbfounded, like, "Who the hell are you?" for one, and two, like, "What's going on?" So he's like fumbling to get the keys. He's like, "Unlock the fucking door!" Like he yelled at him so bad. I was like, "Yes, I love you, man." But I'm just like still watching, like, what the hell's going on, right? And so he gets the keys from him. He unlocks the door for me. This is my drill sergeant, right? Unlocks the door for me, and then he's like, gives me a hug and is like, "Hey, you're gonna be okay." And then he tells Logan, like, "You guys take care. You look after her, all right?" And like he showed me respect
Yeah.
and almost like love in that moment. And I'll never forget that day because he stood up for me. I'm just this private. Logan was a private. We have this fucking rude, arrogant, freaking master sergeant who just had no care in the world for any kind of emotion or like any kind of compassion,
Yeah.
you know. But my drill sergeant did in that moment, and I'll
That's
never
good.
forget that.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, and it's good that that memory and that feeling still is with you, right? So
Yeah.
even through your difficult times, you can, have that memory. And so just to finish off, behind you right now, you have the flag. Is that right?
Yes.
That's Bobby's flag.
Yes. That's the flag that I got for him.
Okay, okay,
So, his mom, of course, got the actual flag that they put over his casket and stuff
yeah,
at the ceremony in the
yeah.
funeral process, but that's the one that I got for him, and so I got just the flag itself, nothing special or particular, and then that flag case, I had it made in Afghanistan.
Oh, in Afghanistan.
So, yeah,
Okay,
I had that flag case made in Afghanistan.
that's
There was,
cool.
like, this, I don't wanna call him a carpenter, but he was almost like a carpenter who did different plaques and things for us, and so I asked him, I bought one from him to get a flat case in, and I just keep it
Nice.
in there.
That's a great great thing to do. So yeah, amazing thing that you got that like done out there. So that's pretty cool. So you come back from Afghanistan, guessing you go back to Colorado, is that correct?
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and obviously life's changed and you're trying to find your feet and everything. And obviously this is really early on in your career.
Mhm.
So how do you kind of like move forward, and do you ask to be kind of moved somewhere else so you can maybe start afresh, or what does that look like?
No, that wasn't even an option, honestly. I was just a private.
Okay.
So we redeployed and it was extremely emotional for that too, because I didn't realize like when you redeploy in America, they have like the veteran riders with the flags and people are clapping for you as you come home through the airport. I just felt this huge sense of pride, like I did it, like I completed it. I didn't think I could, but I did. Right. And then we get back to actual Colorado because this is along the way in different airports, right? Get back to Colorado. They had the veteran riders there. You got people coming off the plane kissing the ground. Like it almost looked like a movie, right? But it was like real and it was like funny. Like we're all laughing about it. And then we're just like all feeling this like relief, right? We're back home. And then they prepare us to go to do a redeployment ceremony. So I guess this is where like the families come and we go through this building. We're in like formation and they're singing, or they're not singing, but they're playing on the loudspeaker all kinds of like Toby Keith songs, who's very patriotic country singer. So they were singing like Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue and I'm an American Soldier. And oh man, it was so emotional. It felt great, but it was extremely emotional. And when
Yeah.
you walk into the building, all the families and like loved ones and friends, they jump to their feet and they're just like praising and like shouting and like clapping and like celebrating the return. So I was like, oh my gosh, this I was not ready for it, right? The commander said a few words and then they played the national anthem. National anthem now is extremely emotional to me because I have such a different, a more like a different perspective, more of an appreciation for it and what it really means, right?
Yeah.
Because our freedom isn't free over here in America. Like, it's not. There's people who die on the front lines for us to have our freedoms that we have. And so I'm crying in there, and this is all things you're not supposed to do, right? But I don't care. And that day was pretty emotional for people. A lot of people did cry when they're rejoined with their families and whatnot. But at the end, they're like, okay, now go, you can run, you're released or whatever. And they run to their families. And it was nice to look back at, but I didn't have family there. Neither did Logan. Her family was coming the following weekend. So we're literally the only two who did not have someone waiting for them in the stands. And so what we did, we kind of watched it, you see it a little bit, and then we walked out the back to go get our stuff and head to the barracks. Thankfully, they made her my roommate.
Nice.
So she was there. And she was with me through the next few phases until she got stationed in Germany. And that's when we finally got separated. So we were together the whole time since basic training, with the exception when we first got to Colorado. We were still in Colorado together, but we were in two different units. But other than that, like we were always together. Um, I had still a lot of anger issues, and so my leadership basically forced me go get seen at mental health. And
Okay.
I was worried because there was a huge stigma for PTSD and mental health, and I didn't want it to ruin my career. I was like, I didn't want to go, but they were basically forcing me. They're like, you need to go, you need help. And so I was like, you think I'm fucking crazy? Like,
Yeah.
I was angry. I was this angry
Yeah.
little hothead back then, and I
Yeah.
was just a private, so it's very dangerous, right? But they were very gracious to me. When I NCO went and talked to the people so that I could get seen off post, I wouldn't even have to be seen going into that building. And I did go to therapy for a little bit, but it didn't help me, and I don't know if it was because I wasn't open to it or I just wasn't the right person at the time. But I really just wanted to like hit this lady every time she asked me something stupid, you
Okay.
know? So
Yeah.
the walls were up. And instead, what I did to cope with all that was what was working in Afghanistan. I threw myself into my work, I threw myself into my career, and I realized that if I could just keep myself busy all the time, I was fine. I didn't even think about it. I was okay. And so I did that. And the what killed me was nighttime. Nighttime, I
Right.
could not sleep to save my life. My brain just wouldn't shut off, and I've dealt with that for years. It's still here and there, but like for the most part now it's getting better. But like back then it was terrible, and they put me on Ambien to help me. And I didn't really want to take medication or pills or anything back then, but I was so desperate for sleep with our crazy hours that I did it. And I had some very like crazy dreams about Bobby that kind of just really messed with my head, and him telling me like it was all fake and like he was part of special operations and that he was alive, and like it just really messed with me, and I was like I can't do this. And so I turned to alcohol for a while.
Okay.
That was, pretty bad as well. I thought it was great because I was living it up and I was numbing myself and I was having fun, but it got to the point where I was about to lose my friendship with Rob Wenzel and Logan because I'd made a fool of myself. I was trying to drink and drive, and they were both telling me, like, "No," and I was angry because I was just like, once she took his side, and I was like, "You're taking his side?" But, like, they're sober and, they're level-headed, and I was drunk and not. So at that point, I was like, okay, the alcohol is not worth me losing such close friendships because they meant a lot to me because they're the only two that were there for me in Afghanistan. But even then, I still didn't stop drinking. It wasn't until I was actually sexually assaulted by one of Bobby's friends. So he was giving me Bobby's memorial bracelet as a gift, and he invited me over, but it was just us two. And you would think, Diana, don't be that stupid, but we started drinking, and I thought it was someone that I trusted, and unfortunately he took advantage when I blacked out, sexually assaulted me. I woke up in his tub with him trying to like splash water in my face, trying to get me to like wake up. I think I scared him because I was so passed out. um when I got up, I got dressed, I asked Logan to come get me, and I just pretended like nothing happened. Like I just forced myself to stuff again and
Okay.
just kept going. One, because I was underage and I was drinking. I was scared that I was gonna get in trouble. And two, I just tried to black it out. Like I just didn't want people to know how bad my life was getting. I was trying to be the strong one. I was trying to pretend like I was holding it all together when literally everything was falling apart. So that changed me, and I stopped drinking cold turkey for the longest time.
Okay.
Fast forward, I ended up meeting my now ex-husband about a year later. Got married. We were supposed to go to Afghanistan again, but he got placed on orders to Korea. So then I got placed on orders to Korea because we were married. Um, but during that time, since we were gearing up to go to Afghanistan, I was on something called the female engagement team, and so it was something that you had to volunteer for. So I got pulled out of human resources, and I was placed specifically for this female engagement team, which was training to get basically intel and stuff from the women in Afghanistan because a
Right.
lot of males can't talk to them. So we're training up for that, doing a lot of training with special forces. It was a lot of fun. We did Black Hawk training and all that. It was the best time of my life. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but we were going alongside the infantry, and I just felt my motivation at the time was I wanted payback because we were going to be with the infantry. I was like, I want payback. And it was a very ugly motivation to have, but it was motivation to get me to be a team leader and do all that. And so I was successful in that until I found out I was going to Korea. Went
Right.
to Korea, struggled in my marriage because I didn't really heal. I think he was a band aid. And I hate to say that because we connected really well, but what you need for a marriage, it just wasn't there. We weren't founded on the right things. It was more of like a physical thing. We weren't really emotionally like connected or anything like that. So we struggled a lot. Um, Went to a couple different duty stations. We lasted 4 years. The fifth year, I got pregnant. Um, well, the 4.5 years, I got pregnant, and then by our 5th year, we ended up getting divorced. So I've been a single parent basically since my son was born. Unfortunately, he stepped out on the marriage, and things just didn't work out. But things had already gotten bad before then, and so I was prepared for it to be over. I never wanted to get divorced. I never wanted to be that person because my parents were divorced, but unfortunately, it happened. And again, so all this stuff is going on, and I'm just stuffing everything. Eventually, I got to my last duty station, which was in Hawaii,
Before you move
and
on, I'm just going to ask a little
uh-huh,
bit about the Korea, South Korea part.
yeah,
So how long were you out there for? How long were
one
you?
year,
1 year out there.
yeah.
Um, and what was your kind of like mindset of that country? Because a lot of us, especially Brits, we don't get sent out there. So what
Oh,
was your
really?
kind of mindset about that country, the people, and even maybe a little bit about how your role was out there?
So I worked in a military intelligence battalion. So to go from infantry, which is like gung ho
Yeah.
type of unit, to military intelligence, it's like night and day.
Okay.
Night and day.
Okay.
They were very lax, for lack of a better word, not as disciplined. And so that was really hard for me because I was like that drill sergeant person. They called me baby drill all the time. And they were like, "Oh, you need to go drill sergeant when you become sergeant." And I actually made sergeant out there, but I didn't go drill. I ended up going to I got PCS to Washington.
Okay. So
Um,
just a
but
question on that. So
Korea,
so
uh-huh,
you were sent out there as a what, as a corporal?
a corporal. Yes.
Okay, okay, and then you got promoted to sergeant whilst you were out there. So it's quite a
Yes.
big time within promotion aspect of your career.
Yeah. So it was pretty
Okay,
cool.
okay, yeah. So
Um,
carry on about the country. Yeah, go for it.
Korea itself was different. I was thrown off because I speak Spanish and I speak English, right? But I went into a country, and it's not like Afghanistan, right? It's different. So I didn't speak the language in Afghanistan, but you have a bunch of people who speak your language, right? Out in Korea, you go, you don't recognize the signs. They're all in Korean. Like you don't know nothing, right? Like a lot of them where I was, they didn't speak English. It was very broken English unless it was like on the base and people who would come on the base or whatever. But we lived out in the actual like economy of Pyeongtaek, like in the city of Pyeongtaek.
Oh,
Um so that was interesting. And like I found out like they have like heated floors. They usually don't they furnish apartments, so we didn't need a lot of furniture, but we were able to bring in like some of our furniture. But so like when they have people who come in out there, like they have furnished apartments for you that they rent and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. The heated floor thing was pretty cool. It was a beautiful place. There was a lot of temples and like gardens and stuff like that. That was like really, really nice. And we went to an amusement park out there for like roller coasters and stuff. That was really cool.
nice.
But it was different. The food is different, but it was so good.
So
Not
good,
gonna lie,
yeah.
so good. Yeah.
Nice.
Their movie theaters are awesome. They actually have like 4D movie theaters. I can only imagine what they have now because this was like
Wow.
back in like 2011 or 12 or something like that. It was 2012 to 13. Um, so it was really cool. It was a different experience for sure. We got to go up to the DMZ, which is like borderline with
Oh
North
yeah,
Korea.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that was cool. A little scary, but kind of cool.
Yeah. Is it eerie when
uh,
you're up there? Because you see it on the news.
was it what?
Is it kind of eerie when you're up there? Because there's kind of like, from what you see on
Yeah,
the news, there's like this zone that no one ever goes to, and
yeah.
uh,
It was cool. They like just stare at you like they're soldiers, and they're just like so serious and like I don't know if you heard the term like mad dog, but like or
yeah.
RBF, like that's how they're looking at you. And so we got to go into this building. It's like a conference room, and that's where we got to step a little bit into North Korea. They had to make sure that the door was locked on their side so that nobody gets like snatched out from the other
Wow.
end. So that was the part where I was like, oh, that's kind of scary. But we got to stand in North Korea. So that
Wow.
was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So got to
Yeah.
experience different things that I wouldn't have otherwise, you know?
Absolutely. And last question on South Korea. What's the kind of climate? What's the weather like? Because you were there for a year. So what did you experience climate wise?
A little bit of everything. In the summer it's really hot and humid. Then monsoon season it rains all the time. Like all the time. You're wet all the time. And then in the winter it's really, really cold. So Korea is the one place where I've seen people actually, and I've been in like snow places, so like Colorado, right? But Korea is the one place where I actually see people take out like the big, huge, puffy army jacket, and I've never seen that anywhere else other than South Korea. That's how cold it got. Like your
Oh,
toes would
wow.
be frozen. It was pretty bad, but it was a good time. It
Good
was an
experience though,
experience for
yeah?
sure.
You're
Yeah,
happy you experienced that for a year.
yeah, and we were young, so we did a lot of like clubs, and oh my gosh, it was a good time.
Nice, nice. That's cool, that's cool. Well, thanks for sharing that 'cause, there's a lot of people that probably haven't ever experienced that country. So, so from there, you mentioned that you went, to Hawaii.
Yep.
So you deployed straight over to there. Well, I guess it's a posting, isn't it? It's,
It's a posting. So
yeah.
actually, I went from Korea to Washington State. That's where I got divorced from my ex-husband, and that's where I had my son. And then I like begged my branch manager to move me because I just needed new area. Just I had to get away. At that point, though, I was a sergeant,
Okay.
uh, promotable to staff sergeant, but I hadn't gotten it yet. I got staff sergeant in Hawaii, so I had a little bit more of like
Bit
I
more
guess
power.
say. Yeah, I could ask for more. And so I did. And my branch manager was really awesome and moved me to Hawaii, which was
Okay.
wonderful for me. We did a lot of hiking. It's such a beautiful state. The people there are awesome. It's more of like a slow paced area. People are very friendly, so that was good. Um, but I struggled with daycare for my son. So there was
Okay.
because it's an island, people are always on and off. The wait list for daycare was extremely long, and so I had to entrust my son into these army spouses, and that can be really difficult because of the way that I was raised. I was raised where you can't trust a lot of people, right? Especially with your kids, because bad things happen, and so I was always worried about my son, and it got to the point where I was going through like I think I went through 7 or 8 people. I actually had my grandma move out for a little while, but she didn't really like Hawaii, so I sent her back, and it got really hard. And eventually, that's what led to me getting out of the military. They basically said you either get it together and you have the care, or go home. And I was a staff sergeant at that point, so I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Like I'd never seen anybody get out on a family care plan, but nope. I wasn't able to withstand like. And here's the thing: when I finally got him into daycare, it was daycare hours, which were like from I want to say like 5:30 or even 6 to like 6 at night or 5:30 at night, something like that, right?
Yeah.
That was normal duty hours, and that was fine. I could totally do that. It was the times that I had to be in the field at like 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, or 9 o'clock at night. Like it was so hard to get people to open up their door for like a 1.5, 2 year old. My son turned 2 out there. So
Right.
it's like I can't blame people for not wanting to help. And at the same time, like I was hoping that my command would be more supportive and understanding. But unfortunately, the person who was in a leadership position at that point, she wasn't. And her kids were like, one was like 18, the other one was like 12 or something. So she's like, "Oh,
Okay.
I'm a single parent. I could do it." I'm like, "Lady, I have a toddler, like an infant. You have freaking teenagers. Of course, your teenager can watch your youngest. Like, what the hell?"
Yeah.
So eventually it led to me getting out of the military, and then that's when everything kind of just hit so hard because I was unprepared to get out. I was a lifer. um, but I'm thankful that I got out because I'm so different from who I was back then. I was still a very angry person, and I wasn't uh I don't think I was as good of a mother because I feel like some other people raised my kid. Like I somewhat helped, but for the most part, someone else potty trained my kid. Like someone else taught him things that, like, those are moments that I'll never get back. That I
Okay.
was so thrown into my career and like career first and providing that I was missing out on these very special moments with my son, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And so I'm thankful that, everything worked out the way it did and that I got out, but it was hard. And I remember I went back home to Vegas first to try it out and have family there. And I was like, I got the support that I need. But it was hard to find a job. It took me about 4 months to find my first job when I got out.
Okay.
And all that PTSD and all that stuff, I was diagnosed with PTSD while I was in. When I first got in Colorado, I was diagnosed, but I hid it because I was ashamed of it. I was scared of it. I was like, nobody's going to believe that someone in HR could have PTSD. Who the hell is gonna believe that? They're gonna be like, "You're freaking HR. You push paperwork. What did you do? Get hit with a stapler or something?" Like those are the jokes, like that you get, and it's
Yeah.
like banter.
Yeah.
So it's funny, but at the same time, I knew what I had, so I didn't tell anybody. I was scared. I was like, "No one's gonna take me serious," and so I hid it. But when I got home and there was nothing to keep me busy, everything just hit all at once, and it overflooded me. I remember breaking down and in a casino parking lot. Just breaking down. My best friend like saw how bad I cried that he cried, and he's a grown man. So I was just like, something's wrong, and he was just like, you need to go see somebody and stuff. And so I agreed. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get help. I'm gonna do that. And so I reached out to the VA, and ever since then, like, I've been trying to get help. And I at first I did one-on-ones. Eventually ended up coming to Texas, and now I'm in a group setting with a group called Project Healing Heroes. And so it took a long time. It's been, what year are we in? 2022? It's
Yep.
been 12 years since I lost my fiance. And for 12 years, or 10 at least, I stuffed and stuffed and stuffed because that's all I knew how to do. And that's all I knew how to cope, instead of like actually feeling the emotions and allowing myself to heal. So COVID hit, and it forced me to be home. It forced me to slow down. It forced me to face myself and everything that I had been stuffing. And honestly, my son deserves the best of me. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to get real serious about this because I was on and off in between the time that I got out. I've only been out for 3 years. So it's been on and off between the time I got out and now that I was like, okay, I would do some therapy. And then I'd be like, I'm okay now. I'd do some therapy. I'm okay now. So it'd be like just for that moment to keep me going. Right. And when COVID hit, I was like, that's it. I'm doing it. I'm going to heal. And so I started going to therapy. And one of the things that they do is like writing. And so that's when I started writing my book.
Okay.
Um, it was at first, to piece it all together, it was just write memories, good or bad. Most of it was bad. And I got everything out, and it felt so powerful to take something that like kept me up at night, something that was bothering me, always in my head, like replaying, and put it on a piece of paper and be able to hold it and say, it's out of my head. Like I'm holding it. It's something concrete. Right. Then it went from that to like, okay, like what are some good memories that you have? And I started doing that. And I asked a couple friends about it, asked my therapist about it, and they're like, yeah, get your story out there, why not get it published or whatever? And so I did. I was looking into publishers and whatnot. The first couple publishers, most people were interested in it. But the one that I was going with, he said it's not long enough. Like it has to be a certain amount of um words. I think it was like 40 or 60,000 words or something like that. So I had to come up with an extra 20,000 words. I'm like, I don't know what the hell else I'm going to write. This is all I have, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what I did was I started rereading our letters. I started listening to the music that he used to listen to and sing to me. And all these memories just started flooding in. And so I would just write it down. And then eventually I try to put everything in order with like kind of how the events went. And I finished my book, got it published, and shared my story.
Yeah. And in fact, I have a copy with me, which is freaking awesome. Um, so here it is. I'll just hold it up for the camera. So in loving memory, and it says underneath that title, a story of love, loss, and living on. And
Mhm.
then, is that you in uniform? I didn't actually ask you this before.
It's actually not me.
It's
That's
not
actually my
you.
friend Anna.
Ah,
So
shout out to
I got
Anna,
out.
yeah?
Yeah. So I got out the military, right? And this is how you get put in perspective. I don't know about you, but I have a bunch of uniforms and stuff like in tough boxes in my garage, right? And so we're coming up with the cover for this, and I'm explaining kind of what I want. And they're like, okay, do you have uniforms? I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm gonna be real honest and transparent with you. I put that thing on and it did not fit how I used to. I had
No,
gained
okay.
so much weight and like the depression and the COVID and all stuff. So I asked my friend Anna, who's a lot smaller than me, and kind of like how I was when I was in. And I was like, would you mind being the cover model for my book? And she, of course, was all for it. And so it's funny too, because the people who did our cover, Eric Shaw and Kristen Shaw, they're part of a publishing company called Black Vellum. Um, they did so good because she had nails. Like we get out, right? And we get our nails done, we do our hair because of stuff we couldn't do in the military. She had nails and she's saluting, and you can't even tell on the cover. They did such a good job of
They
editing and doing
did.
all that on the
They
cover.
did,
I
yeah.
was like, oh man, this is amazing. So yeah, that's actually not me on the cover. That's my uniform though.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. Well, this worth me asking, and thanks for being open and transparent. And yeah, we got a
Yeah.
picture of Bobby there, and
Yes,
we
that's
got
Bobby.
the boots, rifle, and helmet, and dog tags, I believe.
Hmm.
So yeah, very powerful cover there. And then on the back, it's got a little bit of a kind of like overview, I guess, of it. And I've always been honest, and I don't read, but I have had
I
a
know.
skim through. It's very powerful, and including just the pictures in the back. Um, they themselves are very powerful, especially with your kind of little writing underneath one of them, each one of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a really good book. And where can people get this if they want to maybe read more and learn from your experiences that you've gone through?
It's on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. Those are the two main places where you can actually get a copy of the book.
Two main places. Brilliant, brilliant.
Mhm.
So writing all of those down, putting this book together, has that fixed you, or is there still things day in and day out? And I know that that's probably a silly question because you'll never be healed. But has it helped a lot?
It has. When I was writing the book, I admitted in there that I was still healing. But where I'm at now, and even talking with you on this podcast, there's a couple that I've done before for Project Healing Heroes and like another one, and I broke down. And so now I'm realizing like I, I still cry because it hurts. I still tear up, but I am not where I used to be. And I'm proud of that. I've healed a lot. I got back into my church and all that. And I feel like between the healing process of like turning to Jesus and journaling and writing and going to therapy, I am proud to say that I believe I'm healed. Yes, I still cry because yes, it still hurts. It's there's a part of me that was broken, you know, and a part of me that was taken, something that I had looked forward to and invested in and loved so much. It was taken abruptly. And when I go into the details and the specifics of it, yes, I cry. But overall, I can talk about Bobby. I could talk about majority of those experiences and not cry. And that was my goal in therapy. Um, and so healing is very different for everyone. Every person's different and how they do that. Mourning is different for everyone. It took me a long time. A lot of people in the very beginning are like, "Oh, aren't you over it? Get over it by now." Like because that was the military view on it, and that was hard for me to do, and that's why I threw myself but into my work. But it's amazing when you actually take the time to heal and learn about yourself and develop differently and grow differently, you know, and just be able to move on at your own pace. Never forget. I'll never forget him. I was so young that he basically, the loss of him molded who I became and how I dealt with issues. Um, and that is why there was such a huge effect because I was a baby. I was 19. Um, but I'm proud of everything I've overcome and thankful like that God has always been on my side and placed the right people like Logan and Molly to help me through and Rob Wenzel to get me through those difficult moments, and it helps me realize that I wasn't alone as I felt in those moments. I wasn't alone and I had the help that I needed. I just needed to see it and see it clearly for what it was and be able to process all of that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, what you've gone through during your life, and in such an early part of your military career, to
Mhm.
then be able to, I know you mentioned stuff inside of you and suppressing it, but you still managed to do, a 10-year career. You still managed to serve and deploy in different places around the world, um, and still make promotions, and you get to staff sergeant and stuff like that. Still a massive achievement. And so if you don't appreciate what you've achieved, then, let me tell you, you achieved so much. So well done. Well done.
Thank you.
So we've pretty much come up to date with where you are in life.
Mhm.
Uh, was there anything else that we didn't get to share that you wanted to, or have we pretty much kind of covered everything that you want to share?
I think we covered pretty much everything.
Cool, cool, cool. And how was it coming on this Military Veterans podcast? You said that you've been to other shows and other maybe events, but how is it coming onto this show and sharing what you've shared?
It's awesome. You're my first international podcast, so
Woo!
thank you for that.
There we go. There we
and
go.
and it's good. I like that I'm able to talk more about it. I think this was the longest one too, so I was able to go into a little bit more detail. And again, I didn't cry as much. I still feel the emotion, but I'm okay now. I'm okay, and I'm okay with saying that. I'm proud to say that. You know,
Yeah.
it took a long time. It's been 12 years, and I'm
Yeah.
finally okay.
Good. And you did really well. You stayed strong and just thank you. And that brings me to the point of thanking you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, reaching out, and also, sharing what you've gone through because, that's a lot for anybody. So thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that and also giving some of your time today. We don't have infinite amount of it, so thank you for giving us some of that time today.
Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate it. And thank
No
you
problem.
for allowing me to come on here and be your 29th episode at your
Yeah.
2-year celebration.
Yeah,
I
big. It's a
appreciate
big
it.
one. It's a big one. And
Yes.
lastly, as I say to all my guests, thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours. I
No
appreciate it.
problem at all. No problem at all. Thanks, Diana. It's been great.
It has. Thank you.
This has been Military Veterans Podcast. Out.